One. Blog Talk Radio.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Stewart Thompson. Welcome to Personal Transformation. Tonight's a little bit different, and actually probably a lot different, you'll find out throughout our conversation with my distinguished guests that I have here with me tonight, and we'll be talking about COVID-19. Now, as you know, I come on here and I talk about, well, things which we don't normally like to talk about, and which is usually childhood sexual abuse. And tonight, well, again, this is not a very good topic. We're talking about COVID-19. And it is, well, it's putting it mildly, it has created havoc pretty much throughout the world, here in my home, your home, everywhere. And life has become not as we really are, as we really know it anymore. Things have changed. And how are we acting? How are we finding it? How are we coping day to day? What are the things we're doing for ourselves to get through the day? Because a lot of us now, we can't work, we can't go to school, we can't do our so-called normal functions, which we or routines, if I may put it that way, which we normally do day to day. And now that's all changed. So tonight, my distinguished guests I have here tonight are all panelists from the Gatehouse, or members of the Gatehouse, I should say. And Maria, are you there, Maria?
Yep, I'm here, Stewart.
Maria's going to co-moderate with us. I can't even talk now anymore. Moderate with me, co-moderate this with me, and keeping us all in check here while we're talking about this and how we're taking care of ourselves. So I guess right off the bat, first off, welcome everybody. I got Nicola beside me. I got Peter Dawson. I don't want me to forget anybody. I got Sabra. I got Michael, and I got Deb, and I got Peter. So am I forgetting anybody? Mark too. Yes.
That's okay.
So we have a full house here, and I guess to start off this evening, how about everybody check in and let us know how you're all doing? Who would like to start?
Well, I'm doing a lot of walking. Walking
Peter.
A dog. It's a rescue dog, and his name's Cody. He comes from the Cayman Islands, and is a Rottweiler Shepherd Doberman cross. And he and I walk practically every afternoon in a deserted and desolate conservation area in Mississauga, and called Second Creek. Today we walk for maybe an hour and a half, and we bump into 2 people and 1 dog. So we're trying to certainly socially isolate to some degree. And that's bringing a great deal of peace to me. Being out in the woods, to me, it's being close to nature. In addition to which, also I'm feeling spiritually close to God, and she is very, very merciful, and she is very, very graceful, and so I'm finding a certain sense of peace in walking in nature, and grateful for that indeed. So,
Awesome, thank you, Peter. Anybody else would like to share?
I'll go next if we're just going around.
Sure, thank you, Deb.
Thanks, first of all, Stewart, for doing this, and Nicola and Maria for setting this up. Appreciate it. Myself, I mean, day to day hasn't changed a whole lot. The world has changed a whole lot. And I think a lot of people were impacted in a sense that it's kind of surreal what's going on. This COVID-19 is, it's global. It's not something that's in our communities or, even in our province for that matter. It's a global pandemic, and we have not experienced this ever before on this planet. And it was very surreal at first, so it takes a few days to adjust to that. And I think that a lot of people are going through different levels of grief, which I'll probably talk about a little bit more later. But for myself, day to day, I actually spend quite a lot of time by myself. It has obviously meant that I've had to control my outings. Went to the grocery store today for the first time in 2 weeks, mask and gloves on. And but it hasn't changed so much day to day in terms of I'm at home. I still do the exercises that I do. I still speak to people the way I did, but it means I can't meet with clients in person. And it also means that there's an added element of concern. I've had some people in my family that have been in contact with people that have been they've done the testing and they've come back as positive, but fortunately nobody in my family has got it. So there's that stress that's gone on the last few days as well, waiting to see results and whatnot. So, but overall, I'm busy. I'm just backpedaling, trying to catch up with the technology and teaching this weekend. And there's been issues with that online. So I have my peaceful, quiet time. Like I always do meditation. I've been trying to stay with the routine. I think that's so incredibly important, is to stay with your routine and to experience that, spiritual side of whatever that is to you, quiet, meditation, whether it's exercise. Try to stay to those routines and just be as cautious as we each can. So that's pretty much where I am at, and where I've been now for, it's almost a month actually, that I've been having the same routine. So that's my take.
Oh, thank you.
I'll go next.
Thank you,
I'm
Sabra.
Sabra. When I first heard of it happening in kind of Wuhan, it felt like it was on the other side of the world. And as days went by, what struck me is that it was surreal and also dystopian. So I felt a little disconcerted. But what I found, that there were quite a few people relying on me, and I kind of fell into a position of where I had to respond rather than react to this new reality. And so some of my coping skills, and with this sense of responsibility to support others, I made self-care my priority. And I started, more of the practices that I usually engage in, like listening to music, my spirituality, increasing my sense of hope and faith, and also setting boundaries, which is so much part of that self-care we talk about at Gatehouse. And I, like Deb mentioned, I found that I became more conscious, I think, by doing, some of the practices that I already engage in, the things that we talk about, and support the different members of Gatehouse that come through our various programs. So, and I can talk more about some of the thoughts that I have as we go along.
Thank you, Sabra.
Thank you.
Okay.
Mark?
Yeah, it's been a real mix of different experiences. In some ways, my life hasn't changed that much. Being an academic, I work mostly in isolation anyway, so that hasn't really changed. But there's a sense of, a very real sense of the world changing quite dramatically in response to this. And I find that really, really scary, because I don't know which way it's going to change and which way it's going to go. In some ways, I think being a trauma survivor is actually a strength in a situation like this. Because, I look back at my life and I think, hey, I've survived, survived a lot worse than this, and I'll survive this. And I have tools that I can use to survive, and deal with this, and even find positive things in this. But on the other hand, I find that I'm dissociating a lot. And I think that's in response to just feelings of complete, overwhelm at the magnitude of what we're facing, and the potential social changes that this could bring about. And again, I think that a lot of those could be positive. I think the world was really spinning in a direction that was very, very dangerous and harmful. And I can't see anything short of something like a global pandemic to get us to stop and just listen and introspect and think about who we are and what matters. I don't think there could be anything less than a global pandemic to do that. My concern is that the kind of introspection I'm hoping will emerge from this may not happen. And it may turn into kind of libertarian, islands of survival and self-defense, which would just, I think, turn into the end of humanity. I don't want to sound catastrophic, but I think that kind of individualistic response to a pandemic would be very, very destructive. So I see this as an opportunity for people to come together. And I hope that that's how it goes. Yeah.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you, Mark.
Okay.
Yeah,
Maria, Peter, or Deb?
Hey, yeah, I in terms of self-care, like I live with 6 other people, so my house is pretty full. I think, and I'm grateful for that. Definitely been keeping busy. We went from an organization that does everything in person services to you can't operate, and what do we do now? So now we live in the Zoom virtual world. Our services are still continuing and trying to make that happen fairly quickly. My first thought was, what are we going to do? Because there's so many people out there who are struggling, who are looking for support. And we had just started a few programs. They were in quite early stages. So my own anxiety of being caretaker and being the ED of the Gatehouse to try and find a solution to this very real and very big problem in my mind. And I say in my mind because there's always solutions to every problem. And one of the things that I identify with sometimes is that, the worst case scenario, catastrophe, what's going on could happen. And being told that, you can't operate like a lot of the social service agencies out there, then my heart goes out to all the people that are out there who don't have, now access to resources for their mental health and well-being. We're keeping everyone physically distant. And we also need to be aware that a lot of survivors, struggle with anxiety, depression, anger, and now they're being told to isolate, in their homes. And many survivors have lived with years, decades of isolation already to begin with. So a lot of our groups are talking about these triggers or insights that surface as a result of, COVID-19 and connecting it to past traumas, not only sexual abuse, but even physical abuse, emotional neglect, and all those things. And I want to talk a little bit about child abuse prevention later on if there's an opportunity for that, because there's a huge population out there that's, struggling even more with this social isolation stuff.
Thank you. And also, if I may point out, April is Childhood Prevention Month as well.
Yeah.
We're right in the midst of that as well. So talk about bad timing. Thank you, Maria.
Thank you.
Peter, how are you doing?
Good. I was thinking of what we've all been talking about, and I was thinking many different facets of my experience recently. I was thinking about the many Indigenous peoples that I've known over the past 40 years in my work as a social advocate and a social activist. People like the late Russell Means, who was one of the founders of the American Indian movement that I was very privileged to work with on a land claim issue in South Dakota, and another gentleman in South Africa, a place called Umgwali, in the southeastern Cape, who had been a colleague of Nelson Mandela. And how often I was privileged to meet elders in various First Nations. Most notably, I'm thinking of David Manangwe, who was one of the spiritual leaders of the Hopi. And I spent part of a summer with him in Haute Villa, and how he had told me at that time how the Hopi elders had taken their sacred bundle to Geneva and opened it and to the United Nations and said to the United Nations, this is what we're told, is that if we don't change our ways, the Earth Mother will change them for us. Mm-hmm. And as I was thinking about that, and that's not the only spiritual leader that I recall who was saying those kinds of things. I've heard many of them over the past 20 or 30 years say very similar things. And so what I've been telling my students is that problems are opportunities in disguise.
Mm-hmm.
And not unlike what we've all shared, I think we do have an opportunity of, in essence, contributing to a new social order, a social order that's built on compassion and understanding and shared values. Again, I'll use something that I'd heard recently. A spokesperson from the United Nations World Health Organization who said that we are entering into a phase now where we could be faced with a change in the humankind. And when he said that, I did not see that in a negative respect. I thought it was, wow, we have really an opportunity now to open our hearts to others with compassion and understanding. And that was juxtaposed to a story that I heard this week coming out of the United States, how a hospital some months ago had been purchased by a developer in LA. And he'd purchased this hospital, a public hospital that he shut down for, I don't know exactly how much, but not a great deal of money. And then he was now turning around, he was going to suggest he was going to sell it to Philadelphia for $1 billion. And I thought, these are the juxtapositions that we're faced with. We're faced with greed and malice. And on the other hand, we're faced with stories of people opening their hearts with compassion and understanding. And I think increasingly, we're going to be seeing a shift with people who will be opening their hearts with compassion and understanding, because I honestly believe we will continue as a society, as a species, and perhaps in a different way than what we have been increasingly heading towards. I think it's very often, you know, you're heading in a particular direction and you're required to take a change. You're either going to turn right or turn left, as opposed to going over the chasm edge. And I think that this is where I see that we are going. I've been delighted to see some of the programs that we're developing at a governmental level to try to take care of those people who are more vulnerable. And I've been delighted to hear stories of heroes, of people who are going out onto the street and feeding people who don't have food and informing people who don't have an awareness in such a way as this is the kind of organization of social relations where we will emerge from. Into a better process, into a better age, as it were. So I'm very optimistic that we will make changes in the months and indeed years ahead to be able to continue as a caring, compassionate people that care about one another. This is where my mind is at. I mean, I teach human rights at a university level. I know what we should be doing in terms of respecting the dignity, the freedom, and the equity of every individual human person with rights which are inalienable because we are human. And I think of the Afrocentric concept, Ubuntu, which in essence was perpetuated and made popular by Bishop Tutu and by Nelson Mandela, leading up to the Truth and Reconciliation Commission in South Africa. And so eloquently described by both of them as being a concept and a philosophy that in essence recognizes your humanity that is contingent on my own humanity. And what a beautiful way to be able to look into the future and say, yes, my humanity is contingent on yours. And in this essence, to share my water, to share my tea, to share my food with you, because without it, we are not human. So these are the thoughts which I certainly are perpetuating through my mind.
Thank you, Peter.
Thank you.
Nicola.
Yeah, well, I went from teaching 10, 12 yoga classes a week to just teaching online now. So it's been completely different because you can't really connect with those people essentially in a, you know, your normal manner. So my life's sort of changed overnight, really. So I mean, a lot for me, my self-care is meditation. I do some reading. I'm upgrading, doing some podcasts, getting extra training, and then, you know, starting these online classes. So for me, it's just completely different. It can be overwhelming. So it's just, yeah, it's just one of those things. We just got to go with the flow, be proactive, and, you know, because it is traumatizing. So, you know, we just have to deal with what is and just keep going until this baby's over, really. But yeah, that's kind of it, really. But yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Nicola. Thank you, everybody.
Stewart, if I may just pick up on a couple of things that came to mind when I heard both Mark and Peter particularly. And you know, when I did say when this started, it felt like it was so far away, but I too found myself thinking, this is what I learned from my elders, that when there is a crisis, it is an opportunity for us to reflect, to be introspective. And one of the way I started approaching it, I said, you know, Mother Nature has been giving us many messages, many messages. And we, in our frenzied lives, Peter mentioned greed, you know, we just went on ignoring Mother Nature and the messages she has been trying to give us. And I see this as Mother Nature saying, if you are not listening to me, you are not slowing down, I am just going to bring you to stop so that you can start reflecting. And so I think this is a precious moment in human history for us to really reflect on and to think about what are the deep lessons in this. How can we, as Mother Nature is asking us to do, I think, is to press the reset button, to readjust. We heard that we need more compassion. We need to be caring for each other. And we hear this a lot right now. And so I think that one of the lessons also is to reflect on each individual scope of control. And it's a very humbling reality that our scope is quite narrow, but we do have control and we can exercise it, and it starts with self. By exercising that control, one of the question is, how do I keep myself safe so I can keep others safe? And that's about that Ubuntu that Peter referred to, because I am who I am because of who you are. That's what Ubuntu means. And so what it's talking about is this collective responsibility, mutual responsibility. And so I do hope that with the realization that and quote unquote, a gift that COVID-19 is giving us is not only to slow down, but to also think about what COVID-19 has exposed, particularly in terms of the inequities within our own homes, our families, our communities, and society at large, and globally. How are we, each one of us, contributing to it? And how can we reset and readjust this so that our relationship to each other, our responsibility for each other, and our respect for nature and the environment, because we talk about stewardship, but I don't think we realize what that stewardship really means. And I'll stop here.
Thank you, Sabra.
Speaking of nature, I have to sign off for a second because my dog is
No worries.
pretty desperate to go out. I'll be back in a minute.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks, Mark. So any other comments in regards to what's being said so far from anybody else?
I hear all of that, and I think everybody on this call is able to understand, to operate on that type of level, this global, this consciousness, awareness, and everything, because I think we all have that to various degrees anyways. So I'd like to spin it a little bit, because this is Stewart's transformational show in terms of you know, childhood sexual abuse. So I like to just acknowledge what has been said, but I want to spin it and put it and to maybe ground it into specifically the consciousness of a lot of people that I think listen to this show or that we deal with at the Gatehouse. And that is, I know that myself as a psychotherapist right now and a facilitator at the Gatehouse with 2 groups going, is that there are a lot of people that are experiencing isolation. They're feeling trapped, anxiety, depression, a loss of control is a significant way of living day to day, and it's heightened. So people are in a, can be, not everybody, but I'm going to assume that these are where some of my people are. So I'm going to speak to this. Okay. So there's a crisis mode that people go into, and what happens is the trauma in the past can help us adjust, but it can also take a lot of people down and put them into another level of trauma, because their survival mechanism in the brain, the amygdala is fired, the neurons are screaming, somebody's controlling me, I feel trapped, I'm isolated. So, you know, like physically, what's going to happen to me, and that's something that happens a lot with children who've been violated, is that me, I'm the only one, is me, right, as a child trying to escape or not seeing options. And right now there aren't a lot of options. Stay home, go out for groceries, stay home. Those are the options. So I know that in my client base and with the facilitation group right now at the Gatehouse, that those are the concerns that people seem to be talking about. And one of the concerns that I have, you know, and I'm trying to be there for people, but then, you know, in terms of volunteer, and then also, you know, obviously I have to pay my bills, so as a paid psychotherapist too, but what I'm finding is that because trust is an issue in CSA, a lot of people don't want to go to the online forum, or they're apprehensive, at least at first. So we'll see how long this goes. We're not even, you know, we're barely at the beginning of this crisis, and this will go through, you know, several volleys and sets and peters out, because that's the way that pandemics generally work, right? They come in waves. There's usually 3 waves. So the uncertainty with the clients, with those people, is something that we need to really consider. And I'm so proud, you know, of the Gatehouse, and that we just forged through and just made the decision. Yeah, we're going to continue on with the groups. We're going to be there, but I'm also aware of the people that then were concerned with the platform. But you know, my whole point in that is that we, you know, those of us that maybe are a little further ahead on our healing journey, maybe we're a little bit further ahead in terms of the technical savvy, that we are there, you know, on whatever level, like Sabra said a little bit, you know, we're the leaders, and we're going to hold space for people when they're struggling, but also it's so important that we take the time to nurture ourselves and take care of ourselves. Like, I had a couple crises this week too, you know, with family, and I had somebody in my family pass away that I couldn't even go to a funeral. So we're all dealing with things, and it's so important to have that support within the leadership to make sure that we're there for the people that look to us for guidance and support. So anyways, that's all I'll say on that topic, and maybe some people have feedback for what I said.
Yeah, so that was really beautiful, first of all, and very well put. So I'm facilitating a phase 1, and we had a meeting last night, and we decided to continue with the group and do the best that we can. And one of the topics that came up was, you know, how do we distinguish between the trauma of what's happening now and the trauma that happened as children? What's different in terms of the nature of the trauma itself, and also what's different in terms of who we are now as adults and what we have at our disposal to cope with this. And it was a really empowering way of approaching this from a survivor perspective. And I think that's one of the conversations and one of the questions we can put out there to help people with triggers, to help people cope with the overlap in terms of the experience of being out of control and feeling trapped. Because we're not trapped in the same way. It's a different kind of trapped. We can talk about how we're feeling. We can talk about what's going on, and we can hear that others are also going through the same thing that we are. As children, I don't want to speak in general, but I can speak for myself. But as a child, I think one of the most painful things about being abused is the secret, and the isolation isn't so much a physical isolation. It's more of a kind of existential one, or a kind of barrier between people, a communication sort of isolation. And in this case, it's actually the opposite. We're physically isolated, but emotionally and in terms of communication, it's very different. We have the capacity to reach out, have the capacity to talk to each other about how we're feeling, and the capacity to connect online or by phone and be very candid about our experiences, and to know that we're not alone in this. And I think that's probably a really important message for survivors to hear, is that you're not alone. We're all going through this together, and we're going to survive it by connecting to the best, in the best way that we can.
I think that's a really good distinction,
Mm-hmm.
and empowering, a way to approach it and empower the people in the groups. And I think it's also an opportunity to, I'm always looking for the gift. What is the gift that, we go in, we cut her open, and we talk about all the stuff in the manual, how everybody's been affected with the trust, relationships, addictions, all that. But it's an opportunity to explore what happened as a child. There are always going to be positive personality characteristics in that, whether it's strength, perseverance, resilience, whatever it is, courage to do something. And this is an opportunity to look for the gift, and where are the strengths in that character of that individual, and how is that assisting you now, and what options do you have now that you didn't have then, and how can you reflect on that and maybe serve that with other people that are in your community, your family, your group, whatever the case may be. But I love that distinction between the physical isolation versus the emotional, spiritual, mental, isolation.
And there are survivors out there, it's Maria, who still have not yet told their story, and maybe are even unaware of how their past trauma is being triggered again in the present, because they haven't had opportunities to go to groups like the Gatehouse or seek individual support. So I think about that too, and I think about the children out there who are at risk of abuse now, because everyone is saying physical distancing, social distancing, stay home. But oftentimes we know, being the work that we do, that a lot of times the abusers are in that very home that these kids are being told to stay in. The other aspect is survivors who still live with their offender. The young adults particularly is 18 to 24 years who are still in that home, who we are reaching out, and they are not able to take part or talk about the trauma or the abuse because they're still living with the abuser.
Children don't even have an opportunity to go out and stay overnight at friends, or be in the play, or at least be at school during the day. And now all of a sudden, if they're living with an offender who is also at home, I don't even like to think about that. That's just a horrific situation to have a child be in.
I wonder if there's, on a practical level, I wonder if there's a role for the education system to play in this case, just to open up, without leading people, but to open up possibilities for, or just to inquire about how things are at home, and
Right.
is everybody getting along? And it can be, people get
Mhm.
cabin fever, they get really anxious when they're
Right.
at home a lot, and sometimes things can get really difficult at home. And is anyone having that experience?
Yeah.
That I think that might be something worthwhile putting in the curriculum.
Most
Yeah.
definitely, Mark. Being a mom of teenagers, I can tell you what the Catholic School Board has done in terms of that. They've included messages about the Kids Helpful, that it's available with the number. And I'm not sure if these emails have gone out to the kids, but they certainly have gone out to the parents. So I will ask my kids about that. But it was recently in the news too. They received funding, which was amazing that that happened, because that's one of the resources that children have is the Kids Helpful, and to be able to reach out and talk to somebody. We're telling people, we're going to be talking about like self-care measures, like reaching out to people. Who do kids reach out to, right? They can reach out to the police for sure. They can reach out to Children's Aid. But they can also reach out to the Kids Helpful, which seems, to be more accessible, less threatening, quote unquote, for them to be able to like talk to somebody else if their home isn't safe.
To pick up on that, yeah, I was also encouraged by some of the teachers that were interviewed in terms of how are they supporting e-learning and the parents who are involved at home in terms of teaching their kids. So one of the messages and the questions that the teachers were asking is around feelings, engaging the students and the learners to talk about the feelings. And then I think, as Mark, you suggest, it's a very good idea of opening up those opportunities for that conversation without any judgment, of course, so that it opens and to let it evolve. Take its course so that the child or whomever does feel safer. As we all know at the Gatehouse so well, that safety is so important. And that's one of the conditions of breaking the silence. One of the practical tips also for people living in any kind of group setting while we are within our homes or whatever space that we are in, I think it's very practically important to set boundaries and clear boundaries. And these boundaries should be agreed upon as a group in terms of what kind of communications we're going to have, what are some of the rules and regulations, including chores, because routine becomes very important in terms of helping anybody of any age, in terms of dealing with anxiety, dealing with fear, the unknown. So I find that coping skills that can be implemented, can be talked about, discussed, and put in place, not just talk, could be very helpful.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sabra.
I think boundaries are very important in this context. When people are at home and getting on each other's nerves, we need to be really clear about that, especially for survivors. I know that one of the things that comes up in our group, and one of the things that I struggle with personally, is wanting to take care of others, and even to the point of worrying about that excessively, and that can really explode in a context like this. Because I think it's easier to cope with that when you've got, sorry, I have a bit of a cold, so I'm sniffling. It's not COVID. But I think it's easier to cope with that when you've got the flexibility of leaving the house and going to work, or going to volunteer, or whatever. But when you're stuck in the house, those boundaries become even more important. Yeah. Without that flexibility. And I have to admit, I feel like such a hypocrite talking about this, because I am absolutely horrible when it comes to routines and schedules and structure. I'm just like, I can't do it. But maybe this is one of those opportunities that, it's an opportunity for me to learn to do that. But yeah, boundaries are certainly very important in this context.
Picking up on that, I was tested myself just the other day, Mark, related to maintaining or setting boundaries.
Yeah.
I am kind of known that if somebody asks for help, I'm going to pitch in and do my best. But I got this call for help to go and do some grocery shopping. And I asked the person, I said, how essential is this? Because, I'm not going out as often. I need to maintain a certain routine. And it turned out that this was not an essential, and it could wait for a week. It could wait for 2 weeks. So that was my opportunity to bring in this whole notion of boundaries for that person, but for myself in terms of implementing. And I also reminded the person, I said, I am within that age group where I'm actually asked to stay at home and not get out if I can help it. So I thought it was an opportunity to not only test myself, but also explain to the other person that I can't just jump into the car and go and get groceries, expose myself, and then, hurt somebody else inadvertently without even knowing it. Because what we're dealing here with COVID-19, you've heard it being referenced to as a silent war. And I also call it the invisible war to an extent, because I really don't know what that virus, when it's going to land, on whom it's going to land. So setting boundaries is very, very important.
Yeah.
It's interesting. I'd like to pick up on something that I'm hearing here, and that is that you and many other people, as you mentioned, seem to be looking at opportunities that exist for us. And certainly bringing into the realm of what the Gatehouse does do. And Mark, you'd mentioned the aspect of triggers, and it brought to mind some of Arthur Lockhart's ideas around looking at some of those sacred moments that are presented themselves. And I was a child of the Second World War, being raised in rationing. And one of my triggers is I have to go food shopping every day. And I don't have to, but this is what that trigger does to me. We have only one bag of oatmeal, I better go and get another one. Or we only have one quart of milk, better get another one. And what I'm presented with over this course of the past number of weeks is saying, no, you don't. You have a choice. And increasingly, and I think that the Gatehouse does provide strategies and ways in which we're able to recognize those choices that we have. Instead of putting foot to the floor and giving somebody a finger because they cut us off, say, do I really need to do that? And I'm presented with those kinds of opportunities every day now recently. Do I really need another bag of oatmeal? Or do I really need another jar of peanut butter? No, I don't. And so I'm presented with opportunities, just as I'm hearing from various other people, providing anecdotes of saying, oh, I recognize the people out there who don't have food, and I'm healthy, and maybe I can somehow contribute to their well-being. I've heard some stories recently about TTC drivers who are making choices to go and pick up elderly citizens who can't go to particular areas on their own. And they're making choices to wear a mask. They're making choices to wash their hands and add that extra bit, but they want to go and help someone else. So we're all presented, particularly in these times, with choices. If we're willing to stop, pause, and say, maybe I have another choice, just as some of the things that you've said, Devin, you've said, that present these opportunities for change, which are healthy, opportunities for change to be compassionate, opportunities for change that will be life-fulfilling in a way that we might not have had if we hadn't had this particular situation occurring. Challenges, but also opportunities.
Yeah. Well, I'd like to pick up on the concept of choice, because I think it's a really important one. But first, I should ask you, how much oatmeal do you actually have in that bag? Because if it's just a little, you know how fast oats go.
Particularly when you might have a dog that's a vegetarian.
So yeah, getting back to the idea of choice, we were actually talking about this last night in our group. Often we miss the opportunity for choice because the choice happens so fast, you know, especially with triggers. It's so lightning fast. And one of the things that came out in our discussion last night was that even an habitual choice is still a choice. And one of the things we do here at the Gatehouse is we look at that. We try to slow that process down and look at where is it in that moment of the trigger that you're making the choice, right? And let's just notice that and observe it and not judge it. And it's at that point, then we can start to rethink making another choice instead. And I think being in isolation and with everything slowing down and everything just being quieter, I think that's one of the opportunities that trauma survivors can take advantage of is you know, slowing things down and looking at those choices, looking at those habitual choices that we often make and really slowing them down and investigating them. It's a really good point you brought up, Peter.
And Mark, I think what I take out of that is that the ability to make that choice or to have a choice is a strength that survivors have developed over time. And Deb mentioned in terms of empowerment, empowering, and that's the approach we take at Gatehouse. So for survivors, it's very, I think, important to always remember that it is through these strengths that one has survived this long and will survive longer. So what are those strengths that we have? We need to take an inventory of them. Those strengths are our gifts. And we are presented in life with opportunities to actually use those gifts and those strengths. And survivors do have quite a few of those strengths that they can rely on.
If I may jump in here to some degree, and I recall the story that I've heard many times about Arthur Lockhart and how the Gatehouse came into being, how he sat in a car with a student talking about how children have been sexually assaulted, and the windshield wipers were taking water off of the window, and they both looked up and saw this derelict house, which then became the Gatehouse. And somehow it comes to mind how that opportunity that was presented to Arthur in that moment of seeing something that was then able to be the hub and the foundation for a remarkable community project that has grown over the years and has made contact with people in Africa, in Southern America, in Europe. That is an opportunity that in a creative moment presented itself because there is that kind of treasure that human nature does have of recognizing opportunities as they appear to us. It's that very creative moment that we're all presented with if we're willing to take that time to pause and to recognize the opportunity that does exist for us.
You know, when we talk about choice, let me be the devil's advocate again, just because I can be, right? So when we talk about choice and resiliency and all of these things, and I've seen these things, right? 22 groups at the Gatehouse and so much work in this area. Yeah. So I know that and I see that. But when I think about the person sitting at home right now, that's actually in crisis mode, who's already in this traumatic experience, their amygdala is going crazy right now. They want to escape, right? The 3 F's, right? They're experiencing, they want to either fight, but how do you fight this? You can't fight this. You want to flee from it, but you can't flee from it, right? So in freeze, well, yeah, you're freezing, but inside everything is activated and you're in this panic sort of state. And then how do you go from this to a place of just take this opportunity to be aware and be calm? You know, it's like what's the bridge to get from one island to another island? And that's the process of, you know, that either through the groups like at the Gatehouse or the Psychotherapist, and that's a whole journey. You know, we often see people do, you know, these groups over and over again, and they still aren't getting there. And now we're at this pivotal moment in time where everybody's just been told to just be calm and just relax, and, you know, the government's going to take care of you. And, you know, I'm saying, read, get education from the top, listen, go to the World, you know, Health Association, go to that site, listen to Trudeau in the morning, and, you know, like, do the educational piece, get yourself prepared so you know what's happening, a little bit about what to expect. But there are so many unknowns that is so, that's not uplifting, and you're resilient and you have choice. So what I would like you to each share, maybe if you could, is maybe something in a bridge that you would say to somebody maybe watching this program that is in this state of crisis, and how, you know, so we can give some real concrete ideas to people maybe, right? I mean, I've got a bunch, but I don't want to, I got to leave here in a couple of minutes to get to another meeting. So, but I would love if you each could share something about that bridging, you know, just in a hold period, how to support people that are really hurting right now.
Well, Deb, I'm going to take that on and give it a shot. I just had that experience last week with someone. And so what was the bridge? First was just absolutely, and I think all of us know, is just the listening and letting the person talk about what they were feeling. And, you know, you've heard this expression saying, every journey of 1,000 miles starts with the first step. So the first step in that was to just listen. And when I felt intuitively, instinctively that this was the right moment, what I did was what we do so well at the Gatehouse. We both engaged with the permission of the other person in some mindfulness. A very short mindfulness exercise at two ends of the telephone. And, you know, we did that exercise, and a few days later, when I reconnected, the person said, "Thank you so much. I didn't realize how that just the deep breathing and just sitting with my breath and being mindful and letting it go through my body was so useful that I am doing it more each day." And I, you know, and I think that was that, you know, first step towards bridging with this person to help this person take the next step.
Thank you, Sabra. And I just jump in with, there's a 5-minute morning activity for anyone who wakes up in the morning these days. I can tell you I'm waking up more in the afternoons. But there's a 5-minute activity. So I think setting an intention, and it piggybacks off of the mindfulness, right? Like, it's all about setting intention for the person's day. I like what you said, Deb, you know, educate yourself on what's going on. And for those that, you know, are triggered or become more anxious as a result of watching the news, like, sparingly watch the news. Don't make it an everyday thing. You can, you know, like Sabra mentioned, to call someone, to talk to somebody. If you don't have anyone to talk to, but you like to write or journal write. Some people are writing songs and actually putting out YouTube videos. A whole family. I saw one this morning that did a compilation of Les Miserables with COVID-19 theme, and I was like, this is hilarious. This is, you know, that let's band together, literally, and oh, I made a pun. Band together to, you know, share something fun and more light and something that we can do together. So if you can have opportunities for that togetherness with people through applications like Zoom, like, it's free. You don't have to pay anything to have a 40-minute video call. I heard of people doing little kitchen parties and through Zooms, because so that keeps that social distancing. And now they're calling it physical distancing instead of social distancing. Because as soon as you hear social distancing, it feels like you can't even socialize with people, right? So it's now called physical distancing, so that we know it's being away from people, not necessarily stopping the social connection that you have with others. So yeah, these tools are available to people. I can't tell you, I think I work for Zoom now because I've been doing a lot of like training and coaching and teaching people how to use this, people as young as 17 and as old as 85 recently, how to use Zoom and get online so that they're not left without something. I actually purchased a webcam and sent it to a senior person that we are supporting through Gatehouse. I actually sent that off to that person today and said, as soon as you get it, let me know so we can hook it up together and you can see me. And they were super fascinated by how there's an opportunity for them to connect, because that person is alone. They don't have very many people to talk to over the phone. And so it's important to recognize that not everyone has access to these kinds of forums and abilities too. So there are other things. Journaling is a big one that people can do too. It's actually a book out there. One of our facilitators shared it with me. It's called 365 Journal Prompts. And every day there's a different question. And on there is where that 5-minute morning focusing activity came from. And it really just starts off with, what are your intentions? What are you grateful for? What's going to be the best thing about today? So that they're kind of like working on, what can I focus on that's good for me? As opposed to, yeah, we know that COVID is here. We know there's a potential that, people can get sick and people are dying. What else can we focus on? And what do we have really control over in this situation right now, in this very moment? Not 10 minutes from now, not 5 minutes ago, right now. What can I do to make my life better?
Well, I'm sprouting.
What's that mean?
I mean that literally. I'm soaking dried beans and then overnight, and then putting them out in the sun or by a window and watching them sprout.
Very cool.
And then eating them, and they're delicious. And I raised that because I wouldn't have done that if I wasn't stuck at home. And there are things around the house that we could just look at and use our imaginations and just, try experimenting with things that we haven't thought about or have always thought about but never had time to do it. But I do want to speak more directly to the question of how, if you are someone who is really in a panic about this, I find that it's almost as if we get into a heightened state when we get panicked or triggered, and we lose our rationality. We lose our ability to think things through clearly. And the truth is, there is a virus out there. The truth is, it can be deadly and it's highly contagious. There's a risk out there. There are very real risks right now. And at the same time, there are strategies. There are strategies we can take to stay safe. This isn't forever. This is going to pass. And if you look at those strategies and you follow the rules and you stay safe, you'll be okay. And you're going to be okay. There are risks. There are steps to address the risk. And if you take those steps, you'll be okay. And this isn't forever. This is going to pass. And we're going to come out of this stronger. And sprouting.
Well, just when you mentioned sprouting and then you explained it, I was like, oh, yes, we do that every year. Like Stewart and I have this little picture competition of who has the bigger garden. So I know Stewart's, have you started yours already? I know that gardening seems to be a big hit with people too.
Yeah, I've already started. Things are growing. Probably 2 weeks, 3 weeks now. Stuff's growing already.
Oh, you're ahead of me by 2 weeks. No.
Tomatoes, all that sort of stuff. Vegetable, flower beds, cucumbers, everything.
And you, for everyone that's listening, you'll see pictures on Twitter soon. As soon as they start sprouting, we post pictures. It's kind of funny.
Can't wait. I think it's gardening is also a great activity.
Yep.
For people who live in apartments, they don't have access to gardens. So sprouting, you don't need soil. All you do is take some dried beans, soak them overnight or for 24 hours, and then you put them on a plate, cover them with plastic or glass, and they just sprout. Rinse them every morning and put them back out. You don't need a garden. All you need is a couple of plates. So it's something anyone can do. And it's, if you're worried about food supply and, and money's a big issue right now for all of us, it's a really inexpensive way to feed yourself.
Mm-hmm.
A big bag of beans is like $2. And you sprout those, they're eating light and transforming light into protein. And sunlight, you're not even paying for that light. It's a really economical way and healthy way to get good nutrition.
You can sprout oats too.
Yeah.
On that note, I'm going to sprout myself to another meeting. Thank you for listening, guys. We really appreciate, I put that question out there and you addressed it because that is something that is so critical and it's practical. It's what people need that are struggling at home right now in this moment. And thank you for sharing your ideas. And for anybody listening or watching this later, there are ideas on the Gatehouse too. And the Gatehouse is still operational, in terms of online. So reach out and get some support. And thanks, Stewart, for having us all on here. And everybody, it was really nice to see you. And I'm going to go to my next meeting and prepare for teaching all weekend online. So sorry I have to leave, but I have some technical issues I need to sort out. And the meeting is at 8 o'clock.
Thank you, Deb.
Thank you, Deb.
Take care.
Bye, Deb.
Bye.
Not that. I was just going to go back to Nicola there because she practices a very specific form of yoga. How has that been helpful for you and the people that you are helping?
Well, we've actually been helping more people, to be honest with you, because a lot of the classes, people are still paying through a gym or whatever, but in actual fact, a lot of the classes are now free. So we can actually connect with more people worldwide, really, through these platforms by just giving them this code for Zoom, and people just log in and watch. So and they participate, they start to feel better, and it is turning out to be quite a good tool. But yeah, it's just a weird way of teaching because we're just not used to it, and it's just so you can't do adjustments like you would, and it's just a little bit strange. But we'll get used to it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just going to leave for a second and switch on a light because it's getting dark in here, and increasingly I'm looking at myself as if I'm a ghost.
Thank you, Peter. So what other ideas are going on?
One idea that I have is open up your closet. Where you have all kinds of clothes in there that you'll be surprised what you discover, and turn it into a reinventing kind of exercise. Try on things that you haven't worn in a while, repurpose them in different creative ways, and it could be a fun activity, especially if you are sharing your physical space with others, so it can become a little bit of a modeling show.
Mm-hmm.
And this goes for both men and women. It's not only in the purview of women's domain.
Were you in my house 2 weeks ago? Because that's what we did.
and
we cleaned up 3 closets. Yeah, it was great. We actually even put on the theme from fashion television from the 90s to walk around and go, does this still look good on me? Yeah. And when it didn't, it was in the pile.
Yeah, and picking up on sprouting, whether it's beans or oats. Again, you're living with somebody else, or doesn't matter how many people, but I think when you are living with somebody, cooking together
Mm-hmm.
is a wonderful way of opening up, talking about different things, different thoughts, ideas, feelings, learning new skills from each other, and then having a meal together.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't have to be all 3 meals in the day. It doesn't have to be 2, even if it's just 1 meal together. And that can be part of that reset button that we all have to press.
Yeah, I found that since, we've been 3 weeks in isolation, and we haven't traveled or anything. It's just like there's not much that we can do. And I find that we're more together as a family too. Like even though the kids are still on a lot of technology, we are making more time to eat together. And sometimes it is all 3 meals that we've been eating together, which is something that hasn't happened for at least 3 or 4 years. Yeah. So it's interesting that you said that. I was like, yeah, there are some good things that have come out of this, where people are realizing too that there are other priorities in life that sometimes get pushed to the side, or like family time, for example, is a big one for me, like not to have that. And then all of a sudden we have more opportunities because we're isolated. And I'm still working as much as I did in person at the Gatehouse. Sometimes it feels like actually a lot more because I'm accessible, we're always online, but we are making more time to be together as a family. So that, I think that's a cool thing.
And I think you're talking of choices. We're all talking of choices. I was listening to what you were all saying, I was giving some thought to some of the opportunities that have presented themselves to me recently. I have a daughter who lives in South Africa, and she and I have been emailing on a daily basis. Hi, Dad, I love you, and this is what's happening for us. And hi, Shamila, this is what's happening for me. Perhaps without this pandemic, perhaps we would be doing it once or twice a week, but we're doing it every day. That's a wonderful opportunity for closeness to develop. Some of the things that I've experienced recently, I've given the thought to some of the difficulties my parents went through. And truly, I've been presented with an opportunity of seeing, wow, I had no idea that this similar situation would have occurred for my father, and maybe his motivations for doing this or that or the other came out of the difficulties of living during the Second World War, where there was little or no food. 1 banana every 8 weeks, so every 8 days in London. No eggs, they were all powdered, if you could get them. And suddenly I'm finding a certain sense of kind of forgiveness for what I previously thought was his faults. And what an opportunity for me to be able to end not only that, but somehow the spiritual element that still exists of his experience, to be able to choose to think of him in a different way, in a loving way, in a caring way, in a forgiving way. And we're presented, all of us, with those opportunities every day now, going through such a different experience that we would hitherto normally experience. Sharing meals, sharing opportunities, looking at our lives in a very different way and seeing, wow, my father and my mother, they certainly had situations that I had no conception of at all, but at least I'm beginning to get some kind of perception of what they may have gone through. And thereby being able to say, gosh, God bless him, or I forgive you. And bringing those people in memory, not only in memory, closer to me. We have a remarkable repertoire of opportunities right now to change our lives and change the lives of other people. And I think particularly of the Gatehouse, where it has been a beacon for change, a beacon for opportunity, that one that enables us to reach out to others through the process of reaching out to ourselves.
Thank you, Peter.
I'd like to go back on something that Sabra suggested a while ago, and I would like Sabra to elaborate more on this, and maybe the rest of you can as well. Excuse me. One of the things that, as Sabra pointed out, was that in order to start change, then somebody needs to like plant a seed or to turn a leaf over or to start something new and fresh. Can you elaborate more on that, Sabra?
Stewart, thank you. I think it is, again, it goes back to the fundamentals of taking opportunity that is presented now to really engage with somebody and engage very authentically, very meaningfully. And so what I mean by that is to actually listen to what the person is trying to express, trying to tell us. And it is through that deep listening, those opportunities arise for us to plant those seeds. That will then, with some encouragement, some nurturing, would help germinate that change. So I can't, you know, I don't want to speak for the other person in terms of what they need to change, but by listening to them deeply, they are giving me some ideas. So for instance, you know, Peter talked about his dad and forgiveness. And how do we create those opportunities to do that? And I think that some of us are so blessed that we can create those opportunities. So for example, by looking at old family photographs and talking about the stories behind, the narratives behind that person, that persona, that can open up and give the other person an opportunity to talk about, you know, this is what I experienced. This is how I experienced my mother. This is how I experienced my dad. And now years later, I relate to Peter on this because I went through that with my own father. And I felt that by engaging deeply, listening deeply, and just watching and observing, and then looking at a photograph, I was able to reach that place within me of forgiveness, which then took me to a place of compassion, not only for myself, but for the other person. And this is how I have experienced change for the better within myself. I don't know if that answers your question, Stewart, but that's my attempt at going into something very personal.
Yeah, thank you. It does. And if anybody else has a comment in regards to that, please throw it out there as well. But the idea of starting something new and fresh and changing something old is by doing something new. Mm-hmm. And that's the idea behind that. I mean, yes, we're used to this way of, well, this is our trauma. This is how I've reacted. Now what do I do? Well, I like what Mark was even saying, Peter was saying, you're saying, well, plant a new seed, try something different, try something new, anything to change the narrative.
So that just gets, so let's look for the opportunity in the event or in the situation or in the circumstance. What is the opportunity? Let's explore. And while exploring what the opportunity is or opportunities are, we will find the gifts that are being presented to us. And in doing so, we'll also find the strength within ourselves. So what I see this as, perhaps maybe a lot of what each one of us is saying is gift, opportunity, change, hope, and faith.
Beautifully said. Thank you.
Can I share with you a story of something that happened with a student recently in my class? This was at the beginning of this class on compassion, and I had shared a reading for the class with the class, and the student was very critical of the reading, and her critique of the reading was kind of formulaic, and she was expressing a lot of ideas which were clearly not her own, but that she felt very comfortable with. She's a very bright student, and they weren't really coming from her. They were ideas that she had taken on and felt comfortable expressing. And I talked to her about that after class, and I said, it's what you're seeing, you're layering on top of the reading, your experience, these preconceived categories and these predetermined ways of looking at things. And that's denying yourself the opportunity to experience the freshness of what's before you. And it's also denying you the opportunity of experiencing an authentic, personal, sincere reaction to the freshness of the ideas that are in the reading. And she thought about it, and she came back next week and she said, I don't know how to exist anymore. I see that, and I don't know how to continue in school, because I see that all of my perspectives have been perspectives that have been put on me and that I've taken on, and they've become these sort of like reactionary, unthought of responses. So I asked her to come to an office hour, and I gave her a plant, and I said, when you have a realization like that, and you learn something about yourself, it's sort of like a plant. All you need to do is give it space, give it some water, give it light, and it will grow. You will grow. You don't have to do anything to it. You just have to give it what it needs: time, attention, and just space. And I think that's to me one of the most beautiful things about humanity, is that I believe that we are innately and naturally curious and creative, and that it's a gift and a process that we all share and that we all have. And we deny it. We deny ourselves the experience of that gift, because unconsciously we react to things, we judge things, we have these predetermined categories, we have these trajectories, all of these plans, all of these categories, and we deny ourselves the experience of the freshness of things that come to us and the authentic reaction to that freshness. Now's the time to look at that. Now's the time to give ourselves the space and the care to experience that, to look at that and allow whatever comes up to come up, to allow that natural sort of curiosity and creativity to emerge in response to what's actually before us.
Thank you, Mark. As you said that, I was giving some thought to, once again, the topic that we've been talking about, choice and opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
As you spoke, I thought some of the opportunities that we're hearing about and some of the choices that we're hearing about. And I honestly believe, based on what we've all been talking about, is that there's going to be a continuation of these choices presented. And not only that, but people are going to be almost through the process of alchemy, that when we think, we do. And as we go through this process, I honestly believe, as is happening right now, that people are going to be shunning the old way of being and embracing a new way of being. Instead of say, oh, let's go out and go to the movies. It might be, let's go for a walk with the kids. Those presentations of choices will become familiar to us and will be increasingly embraced by us. Where instead of consuming the last bag of oatmeal, one might choose to split it with someone else. I'm being facetious, but what I'm saying is that that's what alchemy is when we're presented with a choice and we choose a choice that then nurtures and creates, we then leave the old way of being behind.
Mm-hmm.
Do that, it does become an alchemy in the difference between a choice that was destructive and negative to a choice that is to some degree forced upon us, but is forced upon us in such a way as where we embrace it as opposed to push it away.
Yeah.
And I think this is what we're certainly talking about. And that certainly seems to be the process, I think, that has brought the Gatehouse into a situation today where just this kind of conversation that we're having will be reaching so many people who perhaps desperately need to hear it, that perhaps without the circumstance would never, ever have got to hear it.
Yeah.
And picking up on the idea of choice, I want to connect it to the work that we do at the Gatehouse. Working with survivors is about exploring and discovering what are some of the choices that are available so that we build the resiliency, we build the strength to go on. And I bring that up because I think that's something that can be overlooked by many in terms of the work that the Gatehouse does.
Mm-hmm. And I get excited when I hear that. And I come back again to this notion of alchemy. When I sit in a group and there's a sharing as opposed to a telling. There's a sharing of an experience where I can feel a sense of camaraderie, a sense of me too, that exists in that process. So that when you have maybe 8 people who walked into a room, there'll be 8 people who walk out, but they have shared an experience out of which they have grown as not only a survivor, but grown as somebody who has an opportunity to prosper.
And
the watering the beans, that's alchemy. You go to bed at night and there's water and there's these beans, and the next morning they're sprouted. That's alchemy. You're talking to your student as I sit here and I think, oh my gosh, that's alchemy. He's actually changed some person by giving them a plant and speaking with them in such a way as that they've been opened to their experience through the process of sharing.
And again, bringing it to the work at the Gatehouse, that alchemy that I have experienced with people that I have encountered at the Gatehouse is that epiphany of I'm not alone.
Mm-hmm.
That is that alchemy that is just absolutely precious and priceless when you hear that from somebody when they walk in and after they have taken those most difficult first steps through the door into the Gatehouse.
Thank you, Sabra. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's one of the main messages, right, with COVID, is that it's affecting the entire planet. That no one is alone in this. Like, we're all in this together. That sense of community. Going back to Ubuntu, right? Like, we're all in this together. You're not alone. And if the people out there are listening that don't have support, reach out if you go to thegatehouse.org and you see it, contact us. The emails for the staff who are regulating or watching the moderating, I should say, the Zoom rooms are there. It's myself, Stephanie, and Paula. So that if you're looking for individual support or peer support through group, we are doing intakes too, virtually and over the phone. So there are people out there who are listening and who are willing to listen.
I think a couple of things. One of the things that the virus is actually teaching us is that my well-being and your well-being are connected. It's not enough just for me to be okay. You need to be okay too. Right?
Yep.
And that's a really profound lesson, because it's not just about physical health. It's about mental health. It's about happiness. How can we be happy when others around us are miserable? How can we enjoy what we have when by virtue of having what we have, we deprive others, right? When have we ever been forced to ask that kind of question? The other thing I think that the virus is teaching us is that we like to think of ourselves as, you know, self-made and independent and responsible for our success and our failure. And I think the virus has made it very clear that we're so implicated and dependent upon everyone else in the world that none of us would be here if it weren't for everybody else.
Right.
People around us in our immediate communities and around the world, they're not our enemies. They're our support system. They are the reason we are. And their health is our health. And it's time to shed and grow past this infantile view of ourselves as these, you know, independent, you know, isolated beings. We're not. Materially, we're not. Physiologically, we're not. And especially emotionally, we're not. We need each other in every dimension of life. You know, materially, emotionally, and physically, we need each other. And the virus is telling us that. That's the lesson. It's kind of like Groundhog Day, that movie. Kept going over and over the same thing until they figured out that the only way to move forward was to learn to love for the sake of itself. You know, and we're going to keep coming back to this. This isn't the first global pandemic. It's not going to be the last. And until we learn how to live with each other, our mother's going to keep reminding us.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Mark.
Mm-hmm.
So what would you say to people who are listening to this show right now in terms of like self-care?
Me?
Anybody, whoever wants to go. But you can go first again if you want, Mark. That's okay.
I get tired of hearing myself talk, so if someone else could speak, that would be great.
Yes,
is that I'd like to say me too. And I think that in the past I might not have done that. I might have just said, okay, tell me more. And I think that for me, increasingly is an opportunity provided for me to be less insular. And that, I think, is one of the lessons that this virus is teaching me, is the opportunity of saying, me too, in an unselfish way, in a way that reaches out and embraces that synchronicity that so often is presented in our daily lives, that we sometimes will walk past. It provides me with that opportunity of saying, me too, that shared experience that I might in the past not have done.
Thank you, Peter.
I mentioned at the outset about self-care being so important, and connected to one of the themes that keeps coming up now, work at the Gatehouse, and even in today's discussion that we're having, or this conversation over the air, that self-care is, you know, has different dimensions. It has the physical, the psychological, and the emotional dimensions. And the other thing about self-care is that if we do take care of ourselves, the flip side of that self-care is taking care of somebody else. So this is something that I am seeing coming out of this COVID-19 experience as well, because people are actually meaning, or in the words, how are you feeling? What are you thinking about? how is this affecting you? And those words, and particularly how are you feeling, is no longer that empty word that I often have heard in the hallways of our workplaces or in the corridors of the buildings that we work in. And then I think that is a huge gift that this COVID-19 is giving us. And if we can maintain it, I think we would be better for it.
Thank you, Sabra. I really think that one of the things that sometimes people struggle with when they come to the Gatehouse is finding like who they are. And it kind of relates to what Mark was talking about with his experience with this student. Like who are you? Where are you? What's happening for you? And how do you make your life better in this moment? I really can't stress that enough, of being present in the actual moment in time that we're in right now. Like being here with you all and being on this call and being here for each other and for others, you know, in the etherverse, right? But where are you? And it's that moment to, like, we say pause. We pay attention to what is happening right now and what is going on in the situation. How do we make the situation well if we're not feeling well? And you have resiliency, for whoever's listening, you have the resilience to know that you can be and are well. If you focus on that, on the very thought that you're having. What is the thought that you can have? If you're having an unwell thought, then you can ask yourself, when was it that I was having a good time? What's a moment that I can go to that I can feel more centered or grounded or safe in? You know, whether that be the last time you hugged someone, the last time you told someone that you love them or they love you. And if you can tap into that thought, into that feeling for yourself in that moment or this moment right now, and that might be helpful for you.
Yeah, it's probably worth taking some time and just writing out an inventory for yourself of, you know, what sort of things calm you down, what sort of things make you laugh, what makes you happy. And just going to those and trying to practice those every day. And just, I think it's really important to remember that no one's alone in this. It might feel like we're physically alone, but we're all, I know we hear this all the time, we're all in this together, and it sounds almost cliche, but we're in this together in a way that we've never been together before. In that we all need to be okay for any one of us to be okay. And that's a new experience for North Americans, I think. That's a new perspective.
Along the idea of having an inventory is the idea of having what I call an evolving gratitude list. And to actually have it public, what I mean is somewhere where you can see it every day. And so it becomes a visual reminder, which triggers off an emotional state, so that you can connect the mental and the physical and the psychological by saying, I'm gratitude because it's sunny today, the sunshine, I can see it streaming through, whatever. But I find that as you build it and as you have it publicly there, it's incredible the power behind that gratitude list.
What about you, Nicola and Stewart? What would you say to people who are listening to the episode?
My go-to is meditation. I encourage meditation all the time, whether that's yoga, whether that's martial arts, whatever that is for you. Walking in nature, whatever that is for you, that's why I always encourage, because that always brings me back to that present moment every single time.
Yeah, I would actually like to echo that. This is a time to meditate, because physiologically the process of meditation changes your brain chemistry. And in circumstances like this, we all need that. It's so important. I think that's that's one of the things that we can do with each other too, is that we can meditate together online. Another idea I had was people organize poetry readings online, where they share poems that either they've written or that they really like. They share passages from books that they've read that have been very moving for them. They share that with each other. And I think the idea behind this is that we want to find things that emotionally open us up and to share that with other people, because that's, I think, what I know that I'm missing, and that I think that a lot of people are missing, is that emotional sharing, which is so vital to the human experience. That's a really easy way to do it, is instead, if you're not comfortable talking about your feelings, and maybe you're not even that good at it at this point, you can share pieces of writing that you've read that are really meaningful to you. You can share that with others and talk about them. And that's a nice way to connect.
Yeah. One of the things that none of us have mentioned is laughter. Appropriate laughter. I just find that that is just an incredible tool that all of us can access. So sharing poetry, sharing reading, and sharing appropriate humor. There's a lot of very creative humor around COVID-19. And that just, you know, it's there. Let's use that. So is also a de-stressor.
Right. Are there stand-up comedian shows somewhere on the internet?
Yeah.
You know, Seth Meyers is really good. He's really funny, and he's still broadcasting from his living room.
That's amazing.
John Oliver is really funny when it comes to looking at social issues, and he has a couple of episodes on COVID. But I'm sure that there are lots and lots out there on YouTube. You know, very important point is laughing together. You know? Yeah.
I want to somehow bring something back, but also pick up on what you're talking about, and I'm not quite sure how to position this, but what keeps coming to mind is how often people in the Gatehouse will come and talk to my students at university or at college, and at the end of the discussion, I might have 2 or 3 students somehow come up to me very quietly and say, you know, Professor Dawson, what I was talked about today happened to me. And I'm always blown away by that synchronicity that often finds a way in which to present itself in a healing capacity. And I'm not sure exactly why I'm saying this, other than the rule of chance, that really is not chance, but a happening, so often impresses itself upon me, that exists during this particular time, of someone who might be listening in a desperation that these people have no idea what I'm feeling. And I want to say to that person or those people, yes, we do. And we may not be able to help you in this very moment, other than to give you hope that there is something different in the future. And I think this virus is forcing itself on us to be able to make those kinds of choices, to open our arms, not knowing that it's touching anybody other than an assumption that it's the right thing to do. And I think this is prompted by what I'm hearing, of the opportunity that this virus is presenting itself to us, to a choice that will be healthy, a choice that will be healing, a choice that will be compassionate. And I'm saying that to that person out there who might hear this program, and it might be in Africa, or might be in Europe, or might be in Asia, that yes, there is an opportunity. There are people just like you who had the same experience that you have had, and have been able to, through synchronicity, through chance, be able to find a doorway through which we're able to walk. And that doorway, I think, is called humanity.
Thank you, Peter.
So, this conversation has been very, very enlightening, to say the least, and very informative in the fact that, well, the biggest thing I'm getting out of this is obviously I feel from just listening to everybody is I'm not alone, and that's a wonderful thing to feel, that especially if you're feeling way out of sorts and you're not feeling yourself, and you're not even really sure what you should be thinking or not thinking, or what should I be thinking, how should I feel right now. So, but just the acknowledgement that I'm not alone and there's so many other people out there is so uplifting for me. And seeing it and then showing other people sharing is also very, very helpful as well. I want to kind of close off the evening with some really, really good positive thoughts here. So from each one of you, first off, our honored members of the Gatehouse, I really want to thank you for your time coming on here tonight and talking about COVID-19 and your struggles and your little tidbits of information on little things and how we can help ourselves. It's so useful for everybody. And I'm telling anybody who's either listening now to the show live or who's going to listen to it later on, that you're going to find this stuff very, very useful. And pointing out to what I just said, you're not alone. Mm-hmm. So folks, everybody on the panel here tonight, I really want to thank you for coming on here tonight and talking about this nasty, nasty stuff. But I wish we should have said, we should have had like a 15-minute joke or something, because we need some more laughter here, for heaven's sakes.
Yeah.
But if you have a segue or a joke you want to finish off with, by all means, put it on the table here. And, well, we're lucky the CRTC is not listening to us, so we can be a little bit coy about it if we want to be, or naughty if you want. But please, a closing note, and please, something with a little bit of hope as well. And more importantly, when we get off this conversation, I hope when you all done talking with me and everybody here, that when you leave, that you take 5 minutes or 10 minutes and pause and take some time out for yourself. I hope you do that when we're done our conversation here.
Thank you, Stewart. I just wanted to go to something that's it's funny and not funny, but there are some, one of the side effects of childhood sexual abuse sometimes is that of oppositional defiance to the rules. And this is one of those times where the rules really, really, really do matter. So, physical distancing, washing your hands, following all the public health guidelines, and then, reaching out to other people about how you feel about being isolated from others. You can always reach out and talk to others out there. You're not alone in this. I don't have a joke. I just thought about that. How some people, whatever, I'm not going to follow the rules, but this is, if there was ever a time to follow the rules, this is the one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it's a way to feel safe, because the rules that are out there they're not rules that are meant to silence you or to force you to keep a secret something that's happening to you that's bad. The rules are there to protect you and to keep you safe. And isn't it nice to know that people in power right now, and everyone around you, is thinking about keeping everybody safe? That's what's on everybody's mind, is that they want you to be safe, which is nice. I'm just looking up a joke, because I can't think of one off the top of my head. So let other people talk, and then I'll share it.
I'm on the spot, so no one can think of a joke right now. For me, it's gratitude. I'm just grateful to be here, to be safe, and to be connected with this community.
Thank you, Nicola.
Thank you.
Yeah, for me, I don't have a joke, but I'm ready to laugh anytime. And I just want to say thank you to Maria, Stewart, for creating this opportunity. And I want to say thank you to my co-panelists, Nicola, Peter, Mark, and Deb, who had to leave. Thank you.
Thank you, Sabra. I too don't have a joke, Stewart. In actual fact, I feel humorous. Maybe it's not humorous. Maybe it's optimistic that we're able to sit here and we're able to envision. I mean, certainly, I believe we all have envisioned someone out there who's needed to hear what we have been talking about, and through what we've been talking about, we'll be able to walk in to that sense of humanity, walk in from the cold. And for that, I give thanks. I give thanks to our Creator, and thanks to the Gatehouse, that this virus has prompted us to be able to reach out to one another. Wow, thank you, virus. Thank you, virus.
I found a joke.
Ah,
It's really funny.
Okay.
Guess we'll be the judge of that now, won't we?
It's not mine, but it's okay. So it's just a poster, and it says, "Feeling guilty about your kids watching too much TV? Just mute it and put on the subtitles. Boom! Now they're reading."
Yeah. Oh, it's hilarious.
Yeah. Yeah. I just would like to add that it's really important for survivors. It's so easy to be hard on ourselves, and I think now's the time also to practice gentleness towards others and gentleness towards ourselves, because we have the time to do it and the space to do it. What's happening now it's not your fault, and you're not responsible for this, and you're going to be part of the solution. We come through this 15 years from now, 10 years from now, you're going to be looking back on this, and you're going to have some stories to tell. How meaningful those stories will be for the wisdom that you'll be able to pass on when you relate how you were able to survive this. So
Thank you, Mark.
okay.
Well, folks, this has been an absolute joy and honor to be with all of you here. And frankly, I've missed all of you quite a bit. Peter, we just finished a group not too long ago. Mark, I remember while you were starting a group or in the process of a group when last time I saw you at the house. And Sabra, I haven't seen you in a while, and same thing with Maria. I haven't seen you in a while either. Nicola, well, luckily she sees me every day. But folks, especially folks that are out there listening now, folks, I really hope you got something out of this that might, falling back to what I was just saying about not feeling you're alone. I've been following social media, and it is so lambasted with this Covid-19. Like, you can't escape it anywhere. The only way you can escape it really is, and from the beginning of our conversation, is for what Peter was saying and Sabra was saying, you just got to turn it off, right? You can only hear so much about it. Everywhere you go, you're given little subtle reminders of what's going on in the world. So you can't really escape it other than to go in your door, shut the door, and turn off all forms of media, and you don't have to hear about it. And I think that's probably a good idea sometimes for some people, because sometimes we need to just stop, think, pause, think on what we're doing, and then get on with it, because it's not going to go away. It's still going to be there tomorrow. Folks, thank you for all your tips on taking care of yourself, self-care. Folks out there, if you're listening to the show, remember to talk and think about self-care. Folks, I'm going to sign off here, and I'm going to stay online here on Zoom with the rest of my associates here when I sign off here. But folks, when you stop listening tonight, remember to take care of yourself. I'll be back here next week with another show, and I'm kind of be doing it very similar to what I'm doing it here tonight. But take care of yourselves, and just take care of yourselves. That's all that matters. Just take care of yourself. So just give me one moment here, folks. I'm just going to sign off here.